What if Netflix let an alien who had never seen a movie make one? Let's talk about Thrash.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we are going to be discussing or debating the Netflix movie Thrash. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is, movie recommendation time. I think I am going to recommend Paradise. I actually watched both seasons. It was really, really good. What'd you say?
Again,
Yeah, again. I was like, remember, it was my first. I actually finished both seasons in a couple of days, actually, and just recently. Yeah, man, that was really, really good. I really need you guys already know what Paradise is about. We've talked about it many times before. We've given descriptions about it many times before. So yeah, I'm just gonna say it's definitely worth the watch. So go check it out.
I think I'm kind of struggling. I'm trying to because I watched a few things, but I'm struggling to think of like a good thing that I watched. I guess I'll give it to reluctantly the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and that was honestly just out of boredom. I think it was like Saturday night, and I was like, okay, I'm not really doing anything. I'm not going out, I'm not meeting anyone. I was like, let me just drag myself to the cinema, just go watch it because there wasn't really anything in the cinema that I want to watch, anyways. And I guess it's okay. I guess it's fine. What annoys me about these movies is they look so good. Like they got the animation so on point for these movies, but they just tell a really crap story with it. And it's like, can you not go and like grab some writers from like Pixar or something like that? Or from one of these other Disney studios that know how to actually write a good story for these movies. Everything looks great. Everything looks great visually. It's nice. Again, you get like the nostalgia, and like the best thing about it is just like some of the nostalgia from it when you like hear certain sounds or you hear like little tunes from the games and this and the other. But anything outside of that is just like, yeah, cool, whatever. It's alright.
does it feel like Mario? Like, does it actually bring the world to life?
Visually, yes. Like visually, like it's like I don't know if you've seen the first one either, but visually those
Nope.
movies are stunning. Like they look so nice. They look so like realistic, and like again, it has a lot of like the elements from the games. Most of it's like nostalgia baiting for the most part, anyways. But you kind of enjoy it in these type of movies. So visually, it brings it to life. Story wise, leaves a lot to be desired.
Is it just actually bad or is it more basic?
Basic, uninteresting, nothing really like significant going on, and it's kind of moves at like breakneck speed. To be fair, it kind of just goes from one thing to the next, and it's just like one nostalgia thing after another with some type of like story cobbled together around it. So it's not not anything great. Like you could probably watch like a half an hour clip of the movie and be like, oh, okay, this looks nice, and this is interesting. But like I wouldn't watch the whole movie. So that's the best thing I watched this week. Says a lot.
This is like, it's like saying this is the most pleasant surgery I had this week, kind of thing. Okay. I actually watched something that's actually pretty good, which is based on a true story, which is a dark comedy thriller series. And the idea is essentially you've got this couple living in California. He's kind of a tennis coach who had to retire from competitive tennis when he injured his leg and never recovered it, never kind of relaunched his career. And she's a struggling real estate agent who's not really all that great at the job. And the two are kind of generally in kind of a rut and are kind of struggling like with a mortgage and whatever. And then it turns out that their friend is a serial killer. And because she is really into true crime podcasts, they hatch a plan where they blackmail the friend into doing a true crime podcast in which they interview the serial killer. However, you're nodding. Have you seen it or did you see it coming?
Did you say the TV series? I think I missed the start of what you said. It's got the girl from The Big Bang Theory in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kelly, or whatever's. Yeah, I did watch that. Yeah, season 1 was great. Season 2, I kind of fell off of it very quickly.
You're kind of stealing my thunder here. That's kind of what I was building up to. Season 1 is actually pretty good. There is satire here of online culture and being a content creator, kind of chasing the likes and doing destructive things just to stand out in the noise of social media. And it kind of has things to say about the culture of true crime podcasts, where it's basically saying, yeah, you're exploiting the suffering of people, and different characters are kind of different versions of this. For instance, at some point, they go to a podcast convention to learn things about podcasting. And then there's this woman there who says she escaped the serial killer and about how she bravely fought him off and is the only one to survive an attack. And by the way, buy my book, kind of thing. And it turns out the entire story is made up. And everybody is celebrating her for being so brave. And the serial killer is sitting in the audience, taking personal offense at what she's doing, because she's now not only portraying him as a chump, but she's also making light of his life's work. And he then confronts her, and that's like, and then things escalate. So it's that kind of thing in season 1. in season 2, they lose the podcast because they get cancelled and then kind of have to move on. And like towards the end of season 1, there's a little bit more going on. But for much of season 2, it's kind of they're friends with a serial killer, and that's a sitcom kind of thing. There's a reason it was cancelled after 2 seasons, and it does end on a cliffhanger. I did like the characters. I did like how it was written. There's some quirky things in there with like flashbacks and dream sequences that is not quite to my taste. But I think it's a solid story, and it does more than it has to with the premise. Its commentary about true crime podcasts is a little bit basic, as in like it's kind of obvious that you're building an entire industry on people getting murdered and kind of deriving kind of thrills from that. But it does take 1 or 2 additional steps after that. And so that's kind of where it gets some points. Season 1 at least actually does something with its premise in a way that was enjoyable. So that's my recommendation for the week.
I'm honestly surprised you got through season 2 completely. I think it was like 2 episodes in there, and I was like, this is not the same show as season 1. And I was like, yeah, I can't watch the rest of this.
Did you watch it all the way to the end?
No, I watched 2 episodes, and I was like, it was a shame because like I watched season 1 and I had to wait for season 2 to come out, and then I was quite excited when I saw it was like back on, and very quickly I was like, I think they've run out of ideas very quickly.
Yeah, so they do spin their wheels for much of season 2, and then the last 2 or 3 episodes actually go somewhere again. If that's why you dropped it, I would rewatch the second half of season 2 because there's actually something happening there. But yeah, I totally agree. The start of season 2 feels like, well, we're out of story, but we didn't get cancelled. Now what do we do?
It's a terrible way to to do it, but I might actually, because again, like you said, it's like easy watch. Like you can just kind of like put it on, and obviously like you can pay attention to it, but you can also kind of like it's easy enough that you don't have to be like too heavily engaged with it, and that's what I liked about it. So I might give like the last couple of episodes of season 2 a watch just to see how it plays out.
I would recommend it. Like it's not the greatest thing ever, but it like out of the streaming series that have come out in the last couple of years, it's one of the better ones, I think, in terms of just being a story and holding together and being about something. I think it's worthwhile.
Okay, it's time for the main event. Thrash. Danny G, please give us your wonderful synopsis.
So Thrash is a survival thriller movie about a small town that is being hit by a Category 5 hurricane. The story follows a cast of different characters who are, for one reason or another, in that town after the evacuation order has been issued. Things get out of hand when a pack of sharks is attracted into the town and starts going after the survivors after they survive the initial flooding. And then the story follows their attempts to survive the situation, fight back, and get rescued. So what did we think of Thrash?
I will start off by saying the dialogue, chemistry between characters, and I will go as far as to saying the performances were all very disappointing and underwhelming. I think there was definitely highlights for me in terms of what was happening and individual performances, mainly between the foster kids. I think they were my favorite part of the actual film, and I feel like the story should have kind of like centered around them, even though it was centered around different perspectives. I think their perspective of what was going on was more fun to watch. Number one, because of their chemistry was really good and their performance was really good, and their dialogue was better than the stuff that I was watching in the film. So I was like, yeah, I think the film should have mainly been revolved around them. And it was pretty interesting too, like the focus. It was just kind of like, it felt more of a grounded social commentary type of thing is what I'm trying to say, why their storyline.
You found social commentary in this.
The reason why I say that is because a lot of the films that we watch is like Eat the Rich type of movies, whereas this one, it focused on the foster children and the trapped residents. So it just felt more grounded.
Okay.
So yeah, but yeah, I think it should have been centered around them. But yeah, overall, I was just disappointed because when I watched the trailer, I didn't really get much from it. I'll be honest with you, but I still thought it would at least be fun. These type of films are my kind of films. You know what I'm saying? Anything just like, you know what I'm saying, natural disasters and watching different people or just like people trying to survive, that is my thing. So I thought at least I was going to get some sort of entertainment out of it, and it was. Yeah, I didn't really think I even got that much entertainment out of it because of the points that I mentioned. I was disappointed with this one, I'll be honest with you. I was very disappointed. And there was some notable characters in this. Maybe not notable, but characters that I recognize, especially the guy from Blood Diamond. Forgot his name, but the black guy.
I mean, actors.
Actors. Yeah, sorry, actors. Not characters, apologies, actors.
I was going to say notable characters.
Yeah, apologies, my bad. Actors. Yeah, so I was a bit disappointed with how it just turned out. But yeah, we'll get into all of that.
Firstly, I kind of commend the movie for make me hate a pregnant woman. It's just like, this might be the first movie that made me do that. She was so unbearable throughout the whole movie, and there was just like something off about her attitude, like the whole movie. She was just getting on my nerves, like the way that she was like demanding, like the way that she saw that this girl only had like one aspirin in the bottle, and like the way that she like reacted to it instead of being grateful and stuff. Like, she was just getting on my nerves, and I was like, they should have fed you to the sharks. You and your goddamn baby should have been fed to the sharks. So that's my little rant about her out of the way early on. I think the movie threatened to be about something without really like, being about anything. It kind of half had like some like ties around like family, like around the characters. Obviously, you had Dakota, who I thought was okay. She was kind of like dealing with like the loss of her parents and like her mother and stuff like that. And then, of course, you had like Lisa, who was like the pregnant one, and it was like about to bring like life into the world. And then you have like the foster kids, like Ron, Will, etc. And I thought that they were all going to kind of convene, and that their whole story was going to like have this like some type of like meaning, or there was going to be like some like type of rhyme or reason about like anything that was kind of going on between them, because they all had like some type of element of like family like drama or family dynamics or like family conflict that was kind of going on within their characters. But it didn't really like amount to anything. This had some like stupid scenes, not many, but there was like one in particular where the foster dad just like pops back out, and we're just like, you probably should have been dead. And like there's no way you get to where you was in the movie without people like seeing that you got there. You just like pop out, and it was just meant to be like this like big whatever, and not big whatever, but it was just meant to be like shocking, and it was a bit like more that was really stupid. And then you had like the element of like the sharks and stuff to it and whatever. And like, I know, Jonathan, these are your type of movies. I never really care for anything like this. Like, I've never watched Jaws or anything like that. It's not my type of movie. I don't really care for like these like natural disaster movies or anything like that. So then you kind of like add the element of the sharks to it, and yeah, like a couple of people get killed and whatever, and it's just like, yeah, like it's not really that entertaining. It's not really like that great. And then you have like just like random conveniences that happen and stuff like that, and it's just all uninspiring. It almost feels like AI kind of wrote the script, in a sense that you kind of give it a few prompts, you give it like some like character drama, you give like some type of like reasoning behind whatever, and then AI kind of like spits out a movie for you. And I feel like that is kind of what we got here. So to people that actually, if people actually wrote this, maybe we need to check your work against AI and see how fraudulent the script was.
Yeah, so in the cold open, I said this movie was made by an alien who had heard about movies but never actually seen one. And I kind of stand by that theory because it is kind of the most basic disaster movie you can imagine, right? We've got a disaster, we've got a cast of characters, they all have their thing going on, and then they survive in the end, or most of them do. And that's kind of the movie. There isn't a big through line. There's no big culmination other than they fight some sharks in the end, which you probably saw coming. It kind of has the trappings of like character arcs and, maybe even themes or whatever, but it doesn't actually include them in the movie, right? It's almost like this is like a brainstorming session that just somehow got filmed. That's kind of what it looks like. And it's way too expensive and it's way too effects heavy for that to be the case. But that's kind of how it comes across, because each character is like a thing, like a story you might tell about somebody being trapped in a flooded town full of sharks. Each one of them could have potentially carried a movie if they had been developed to a point where they can carry that movie, where they can fill the runtime and where there's enough going on with them that it actually works. And I think none of them really do. Like, they all kind of go through the motions, and it's all kind of obvious, and it's all more or less what you expect it to be, and not very much matters. I think this is just broken as a movie just because there isn't a story. Like what is this movie about? Like, people are in danger and then they survive. That's about it. Let's talk about it.
I think it's right to say that it's a broken film. And kind of like coming off a bit what Hervé said, because about this is not really his type of film. He hasn't really seen Jaws. It was actually going to be, like, my question was actually going to be, how does this compare to the other films within the shark genre? Hervé, so you haven't really seen like shark movies in general, survivor type of films?
No, I've not seen Jaws. I've not seen the Meg or whatever.
You've seen survivor films, right? Like, just
Give me an example. I try to avoid them. The Mist, maybe, yeah. Like, The Mist is kind of like a survival movie.
Okay, but basically, I was gonna say, would you guys, how does this compare to the other shark type of movies that we've seen? Would you guys kind of say that this is like a Jaws ripoff?
What I'll kind of compare it to, or what I'll kind of say to it is, I think we kind of discussed it when we discussed Godzilla Minus One, where there's two type of kaiju movies. There's a movie that focuses on the kaiju, and then there's a movie that focuses on the humans and the people behind it. And I feel like in these type of movies, you can only go so far with like the spectacle. Like, you know, we saw things like I was Tornado or whatever like that where there was like tornadoes and tunnels. Like,
That's Twisters. Tornado is the Scottish samurai movie that made,
oh,
I think, $10,000 at the box office.
oh, okay, yeah, okay. I got that confused. I got
So,
confused.
despite the name, there are zero tornadoes in Tornado, but there are some in Twister.
Fair enough. Fair. Okay. Cool. Good to clarify. But to kind of compare it and like say why like why the ones that I've watched like Godzilla Minus One etc. worked is because, you know, there kind of has to be like a human kind of core element behind it, and there has to be like some type of like story that you can kind of get behind, because there's only so much that you can do with a natural disaster, especially like we've seen everything. Like there's no new like, you know, animation, and there's no new type of like kills or like tension that you can like really build in these type of movies that are going to be like super innovative. So the best you can do is just tell a really compelling story behind it. So, you know, again, another one that comes to mind is A Quiet Place. Day Zero or Day One or something like that. I'm getting these movies titles so long. But the one with Lupita Nyong'o behind it, again, where it's like, it's a disaster movie, but we're watching someone that's going to die anyways. And it's like, you know, how do they kind of treat the end of the world? For everyone else, it's all panic. But for her, she just kind of has this like one destination that she kind of wants to get to. And you kind of follow that journey. Again, like Daniel said as well, it's like, it's almost there. Like there's like elements or like there's like pieces of a character or there's makeup of characters where you can be like, oh, this would be like, you know, super interesting to kind of like maybe explore this a little bit further. But they just kind of don't. They just kind of like mention it, and it doesn't really go anywhere or mean anything by the end of the movie.
And this is not a poorly made movie on any other level other than story, right? I think it looks pretty nice for the most part. I think the shark effects are fine. I think that the flooded town looks okay. It's just they never take the step to actually do something interesting with it, right? Like throughout the movie, I kept writing my own movie, right? Where like, okay, what can you do with a flooded town that is full of sharks? And you kind of have to make do, and you have to kind of improvise your survival tools, right? Like, what crazy thing can you do with a shark in your living room or whatever, right? Like, and they don't really, like, they get attacked by sharks a few times. And probably the most creative scene in this was when this one character, is it Dakota, had this lamp stuck to her helmet or to her head, and she's about to be attacked by sharks, and then they kind of go away, and then we kind of see her from above, and the light of her flashlight illuminates the water enough that we see that the great white shark is going underneath her, and the other sharks are scared away by that. Just as a shot, if you turn off the sound and just watch those 30 seconds, looks pretty okay, right? Like, don't ask questions like, why does the great white shark not attack her, or why, you know, why is any of this happening? But just in terms of, does this look nice? The answer is yeah, kind of. But then that's already the highlight. There's not much else going on in this movie where I said, oh, you can do something crazy with this, right? Like, I'm not even that big of a shark movie guy. I've seen Jaws and I've seen Sharknado, and that's about it. But you can just imagine all the things you can do with sharks in a small town, where everything, like you spent the first third of the movie or so setting up the geography of the town, where you make it clear, okay, what exists in this town, and you put in some weird stuff, unique architecture, or a certain layout to the town, or something, right? Or like even do like a flooded mall or shopping center or something like that, right? And suddenly everything they need to survive is in the flooded shops, and it's full of sharks or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not hard to just make a wish list of things you could do in a movie like this. And if you're not interested in telling real character stories, you could just do that for 2 hours. And I think there's a world in which I get on board with that, where like the characters are nothing special, but we're like, it's a bit like a slasher movie or like a Final Destination movie, where it's not so much about the characters, it's about what situations do these characters find themselves in. And that can absolutely work if you are sufficiently creative. And that is not the kind of movie this is. But then it's also not the kind of movie where we really care for the characters, because all of the characters are kind of just stock characters, and they're kind of going through the most basic beats. And then in the end they win. And because the movie kind of exists in this halfway, as this half measure, where none of those two, like it kind of promises both, but it doesn't deliver on any of those. That's kind of why it's so bad. It's not like this was doomed from the start. Like, I'm totally on board with a weird premise, like sharks in a small town, like sharks in your living room. Go, like, tell me, like, impress me, wow me. What was it like? they will kill you, right? Not that great a story, but 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, it does something cool. And that's why I walked singing its praises, and that's why our review was broadly positive on that, even though it's not going to set the movie making world on fire. And this had the potential to do something similar, where if 3 or 4 times throughout the movie it had impressed me with its crazy stunts or a weird, like putting sharks where they normally aren't, right? And had characters having to deal with that. That's your movie. That's all it took, and it didn't do that.
You know what? I actually feel like this could have been a good movie, going back to what I said, if this was revolved around the foster kids, as well as going off the meat truck plot. You don't actually see meat, but the meat truck was full of blood. So I thought that was actually, like, it was interesting because, Daniel, you even brought up that point where when you watched the trailer, that was something that kind of like drew your attention. Like, I thought, even though it might not be like a clever biological reason for what kind of like brings in the sharks, or that kind of is in a way, but it's not actually unrealistic, but it is kind of unrealistic in a way. But it was interesting. It was something which kind of like, I thought wasn't like a familiar trope in these type of movies. So I think they had something with the foster kids, as well as the whole meat truck idea. Is just why it wasn't executed well was based on character logic from other characters, as well as bad performances. Because the character logic, Lord have mercy, there was some decisions that characters made in this film that was just like, Lord, I was just in shock. Like, there was one scene where the guy in the actual meat truck, after seeing someone else getting eaten by a shark, jumped out of literally opened the door, jumped in the river, and then it got eaten by a shark straight away. I was like, bro, you literally just saw someone get eaten by a shark. Why the hell? And his van wasn't even sinking. That's what even made it worse. His van was not sinking. Also, this wasn't really a decision. This was something which didn't really make sense. And it showed to me that, okay, the storytelling in this is that from this point I'm about to mention, that's when I said to myself, yep, this is not going to be a good movie. It was when one of the main characters, the girl that was in the house, the black girl that was in the house, ended up saving the pregnant woman. When she went down to go save the pregnant woman, they didn't show how they got back up into her house, because how she got down in the first place was pretty difficult. She jumped off her window, jumped onto, what did she jump onto again? Was it the car first or the
It was like a shed.
shed?
I loved how convenient that was, where when it was time to save her, it just kind of floated into place, stuck in place. And then the minute it wasn't needed anymore, it just kind of floated away. I was like, okay, fair enough.
Literally, like, that there was lazy writing to me. And when I saw that, I said, yeah, we're in for a long, long day. So that kind of like foreshadowed what we got. And I had a good feeling. But like I said, back to what I was saying, I do think they could have done something, because I'm going to ask you as well about the whole meat truck twist. Like, how did you feel about that? Like, did you think it was like a clever catalyst for like the whole shark frenzy? Or would you say it was like a convenient plot device?
So the trailer almost put me to sleep. Like, it's like 2 minutes long, and the first minute or so is like the most basic disaster movie stuff you've ever seen. And then at about a minute 10 or something, the meat truck spills over, and that's what brings in the sharks. And that kind of woke me up, where I said, okay, that makes sense, right? Like, we know about the whole chum in water and blood in water kind of thing. And we know that attracts sharks. There's a whole bunch of blood and meat and guts now floating in the middle of this town. Of course, the sharks come, right? And I thought, okay, like, just based on that shot was framed and how it was positioned in the trailer, I thought, okay, this is the turning point where it gets weird, or at least a little bit fun. It just didn't. That's kind of the problem. Like I said earlier, if the whole thing was just an excuse to have sharks be in places where there's normally no sharks, and that's kind of the attraction that could absolutely have carried the movie. And that is kind of the expectation the trailer created in me, because of how unusual that is, right? Like, that is kind of what makes the scenario work. Why else would sharks be in this small town, even if it's flooded? It's a bit like Snakes on a Plane. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah.
Right? So, like, Snakes on a Plane, crazy premise, but the movie actually, when you actually watch it, the movie goes into pretty elaborate detail on why the snakes are on the plane and where they can go and why that's a problem and so on, right? And that then leads to this crazy situations where people get bitten and killed by the snakes in weird ways, right? And it's not just wacky randomness, it's set up properly. I think, like, it's been a while since I saw the movie, but it's basically set up properly to the point where it kind of makes sense as you're watching it. Not in a sense of being really realistic, but like, it kind of checks out, right? Sometimes a movie, if it's good enough, only has to work on that level. And this had the potential to work on that level. It's like, I think I've mentioned before this whole thing about this idea that movies operate on first past the post logic, right? Where a movie could be compelling on just about any level, right? Premise, effects, story, characters, action, whatever, right? But it has to be at least good in one of those. And then if it sells you on one of those, the others become less important. Classic example: Star Wars, pretty hokey dialogue for much of it. But if you're on board with the other stuff, the world, the characters, the action, the dialogue doesn't matter as much. If you're not on board with it, the dialogue really stands out. And here I think it was similar, where it could have been compelling based on the characters, it could have been compelling based on the action, it could have been compelling based on the weirdness of the premise. And because it doesn't get there for either of those, it's not compelling. I think that's why. But I think the trailer had this promise of, this is where it gets weird, and this is our unique selling point in terms of what the movie offers. And then it spends all its time on these boring characters. And like you mentioned, the orphans, they were not the worst part of it, and they were probably the least generic part. But it never really came together for me, where I said, okay, why are they there? And why are we focusing on them? What does this have to do with anything? And it never quite got there. And the only thing where it kind of holds together is where in the end, the evil stepfather has died. And they get in the truck and say, oh, we're going to go to Florida where it's safe. And then the last shot is like the meteorologist looking at this massive storm heading for Florida. It says, you gotta be kidding me, Fade to Black. Like, it's kind of sequel bait, right? Like, it's kind of setting up a sequel of how these kids, wherever they go, is gonna be a massive disaster. And the third movie is probably going to be like in Tornado Alley, where they go, okay, we're gonna go away from the coast, we're gonna move to Ohio. Surprise, it's a twister. And then they move to, I'm gonna keep this going for a while. And then they move to Hawaii. Surprise, there's a volcano eruption. And then they move to Canada because Canada is safe. Oh no, it's a blizzard. And then I don't know what else. Let's keep this going. What else can they do?
And then they go to, I don't know, where do they have tsunamis?
Japan.
I mean, they'll bring it full circle back to, so, you know, towns being flooded, etc. And end it with a tsunami in Asia somewhere.
I have co-workers in the Philippines, and we've cancelled meetings due to typhoons, which is a fun thing to have in your inbox.
Can I just say, was that not the stupidest scene of when the stepfather popped back out of the water in the kitchen behind them and took them all by surprise? I'm like, the water wasn't deep enough for people to swim. It was like shallow enough where he stood in it and it was like waist high, and there were also sharks in there, and it was also bleeding. So the scent would have attracted the sharks as the steak did. And he just kind of pops out as like they're saying F him, basically. And I was a bit like, I was like, what? I was so confused. I was like, what? I was like, how the hell did he come back in here without screaming, underwater? No one saw him. I was like, this is like, you've literally just done this for shock factor and for one more moment for the kids to kind of go against the stepfather, and to have that stupid scene where they really focused on it, where the stepfather tries to throw like a punch or something like that, and the older one catches it. Or
that scene was funny. I'm sorry, it was stupid.
It was so stupid, man. Oh, like that was all just stupid, to be fair. And like the whole like finding, oh, like you're getting these checks for fostering us. You could have been having eaten bed this whole time, and it's like you clearly saw the guns and the steak in the fridge downstairs. You didn't then need the additional like note to be like, oh, you get a paycheck for us for whatever, and it doesn't really like. It's who cares? Like no one, like it doesn't really matter at that point.
I get what you mean. I do get what you mean, but that kind of does fall into what I was saying in terms of, you know, the character logic in this was stupid, and it just reflects that on the story writing. The story writing was lazy, and Netflix they're notorious for this. I don't get what it is exactly. Like, why don't they learn from their mistakes? Like, what is it a thing where because they're heavily reliant on statistics, you know, in terms of, okay, who watches what, why do they watch what, and let's try and implement that in our storytelling. Do you think they're guilty of that when it comes to this?
In what way? It is kind of second monitor content, right? Like, this is the kind of movie where something borderline exciting happens every 10 minutes or so. And so you can look up while you're folding laundry, right? Or cooking dinner. I guess the movie works on that level.
And I would also say, and I mentioned social commentary before, because I do believe there was social commentary in this, even though it was lazy. Social commentary when it comes to climate, social commentary when it comes to the foster care system, social commentary when it comes to views Americans have on Africans. I think there was one scene which was funny.
I was going to bring up the hippo story. Any thoughts on that? there's a bunch of meteorologists who are trying to get into. Are they meteorologists, or they're trying to get into town, right? In order to save their friend, right? And one of them is African, right? Where's he from? Nigeria? He says at one point.
I forgot where in Africa he's from, but
Just as you continue, I do not need to see this man in another movie. He like his dialogue always gets on my nerves, especially after watching.
Sure, hater. What do you mean?
Oh, he gets on my nerves so much, man. He gets on my nerves.
So he tells this story about this weird long story about in his hometown in Africa. The most dangerous thing in the river is the hippopotamus, which is true. Like these things are like they're kind of a joke to us, but like they are predators and they will mess you up, right? If you're like in a river and there's a hippo and it attacks you,
They've killed the most humans out of all animals.
something like that, right? Yeah. So like they're bad news, right? And he has this long meandering story about how a hippo fought some sharks, and I already forget the punchline. And then his American coworker asks, "Okay, what did you go back to your tribe to fetch your spear and kill the sharks?" And I said, "No, I went to my apartment, called the police. I don't live in the Jungle Book, you white person."
Yeah, it was. I found it funny.
It's so dumb it wraps back to being almost funny again. But it's like, what's the point of this?
Yeah, but also you wouldn't ever expect a line like that to happen in a film in 2026 because that's not a reflection of. I don't think people are that ignorant and stupid anymore. So it wasn't really a true like it was something that I'd expect back in the day in movies back in the day. But now it was like,
Yeah. And if they are, they're now to hide it.
yeah.
Like if he believes everybody in Africa lives in mud huts, wearing straw skirts and fighting with spears. Like even if you believe that, you're not gonna say it out loud. Like just about anybody has figured that part out.
Yeah. Nah,
But what's like seriously, what's the character level? Like, was there any other point in the movie? Like, I'll be honest, I struggled to pay attention to this because it was also mediocre. But was there any other point where people were being racist towards him because he was African? And like,
No.
like ignored his expertise, talked over him. He should have been the leader of the expedition, but he wasn't because he's not American. Like anything like this, like because to me it kind of came out of nowhere.
Honestly, I was so confused. Like I was so confused when that line came out. I was a bit like, did I hear that right? I was like, why? So why would you say that? Like it just didn't make sense, and it felt so out of place for the movie that I was watching as well.
It was for humor purposes. So it was random. You're right. It was random, and there was no need. But clearly, they were just trying to be funny.
Talking about social commentary, right? Like set this up in some way. Like a lot of people think that Africa is kind of a backwards place, right? But they are leading in certain medical fields, for instance, right? Because a lot of like Ebola hotspots are in Africa, and so the countries that are affected by this are really good at containing and treating Ebola, right? And if you want anybody to consult on how to fight Ebola, you get Nigeria. I think it's Nigeria that's world class in this. And like there are certain things where maybe people don't expect this. And maybe there's I don't know, an African country that produces really kick-ass meteorologists because whatever, their local weather or something. And Americans don't expect this. They expect everybody from Africa to be like the poor exchange student who's just happy to get out of there. You know what I mean? Like that could have been the thing they're commenting on. But then they don't, right? Anchor this somehow in the characters and how they talk and how they relate to each other and whatever. Just anything.
So you guys didn't feel like, besides that point I just made, you guys didn't feel like there was no sort of social commentary in this film?
No, not at all. Like,
Because I think there was, in terms of even neglect as a theme, was definitely something which I think they were trying to portray.
in the kids,
System neglect, climate neglect, so the environment.
employee neglect, I would say. If they knew the storm was coming and you asked a pregnant lady to come into work that day,
But like, is any of that tied into the story, and is any like it doesn't make any points, or does it just mention these things?
I mean, I was just helping Jonathan out here with with an additional point. So, Jonathan, that's all you may.
I'm just saying is what they were their attempts. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't as, it is simple, but they were trying to do things, is what I'm trying to say.
Even another like heavy line that was like so stupid and like things people wouldn't say was when Dakota kind of first came out, when she was like, "Oh, I need to go to the shops," because like she couldn't order takeaway anymore, so she actually had to confront the world and actually step outside. And then the man was like, "Oh, where have you been? I've not seen you since your mom died." And it's just like, people probably could say something like that, but it's like a very careless thing to say, and it was a bit like whatever. And obviously, like she kind of reacted the way she did, and she kind of went back into her house or whatever. I did like her opening in terms of like just kind of showing how she was like trying to like be a little bit like shut off from the world and whatever. Even though again, it kind of doesn't really like have a strong through line throughout the whole movie. But that was just like another line. I was like, why would that be the first thing you say to her? Like, her mum's just died. She clearly has been away.
And she is agoraphobic, so there's a medical reason for why she can't go outside and why she's reliant on things like delivery, right?
She's what, sorry?
Agoraphobic.
What's that mean? What's that? Did I miss that?
Afraid of open spaces and of people.
Is she actually like that? And like, so is she? Oh, I didn't even know. I think I missed that. I missed that explanation.
Yeah, so that's the whole thing, and that is why she's relied on things like delivery services, and that is why that breaking down is a problem for her. Couple of observations here, or more questions. Does that ever come up when she has to help Lisa? Because like this idea of somebody who medically can't function in the world, who now has to save somebody who is in an even more vulnerable state. That's a story, right? Like that is something you can absolutely make a movie about. And I feel like I've seen that somewhere where somebody has to really overcome their nature to do what they know is the right thing. But they struggle with it, and them overcoming that is the story. And I don't believe that was here.
I don't even think they make it clear that she's, I'm just going to call it AG.
Yeah.
They didn't really make that clear. I thought the reason why she couldn't go outside was because of the death of her mother. And I thought maybe something happened to her mother where she, I don't know if she died in some sort of plane crash or she just died somewhere in public that triggered her to not go outside, where they were in some sort of accident. So that's what I thought, she couldn't go outside. I didn't know it was because she was AG. But in terms of your question, no, it kind of felt like her survival superpowers just kicked in.
That's the case for everybody, right? The orphans just make a bomb.
Yeah.
And then, like, Lisa gives birth on her own, is literally surrounded by a giant pool of blood.
Yeah.
Which does not attract the sharks, right? They show up, but they don't attack her. And then she puts the kid on like a floating piece of wood and says, "Mommy's gotta kill a shark. Be right back." And then she does.
Yeah, that scene was freaking crazy. There was that scene, and it was the scene with the bomb, because the way that they casually threw it, like the way that they casually threw the bomb in the water, and then they went next to the bomb, casually fighting the sharks. I'm like, bro, I'm pretty sure a bomb doesn't take that long to go off. So
they needed to attract the shark, right?
I get that.
Because the shark had to be close. I was in a pool once where somebody threw in a firecracker, and the shockwave hurt. Like, it was a tiny firecracker in a large pool, like 10 meters away, and when the shockwave hit me, it hurt. If a bomb goes off, what I'm just saying is, underwater shockwaves really can mess you up. In a large bomb, in close space, they would have been Chucky salsa. It makes even less sense than you think.
I was laughing because I thought that the uncle was going to electrocute everyone in the pool when he had like the taser and he was about to put it in the water. Or he did throw it in the water. And obviously it only got the shark and no one else. But I was like, you're about to kill everyone by just like electrocuting everyone in the water. Again, I don't know the science behind it. I don't know if that would actually happen. But obviously you just know not to put electrical things in water whilst people are in the water.
I think that's cartoon physics. Like, I don't think that actually works. But yeah, it's like within the logic of the story.
Worked on the sharks,
I guess.
But they did do something cool. I thought the whole vibration thing was cool, where she was, getting all different types of toothbrushes and anything that just vibrated, device that vibrated, and then she, I thought that was pretty cool. So they had some cool ideas.
Yeah, I guess that's fine. The sharks are water monsters, so they take double electricity damage or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like the bottom line in all of this is, like, none of this makes enough sense and none of this is fleshed out to the point where it can carry a movie, right? And it's just all very, very by the numbers. Like let's just brainstorm stuff that might happen in a disaster movie with sharks. And then we're going to put that in the movie. And honestly, like, one of the thoughts I had as I was watching this is, this feels like a video game. And it's often kind of like a lazy critique of movies to say this feels like a video game. But I think this is actually written like a video game, because there are different levels, right? Like different locations where there are different challenges. And each character has a challenge to overcome, and then overcome it. And then you get the happy end. Then you get the good ending, and then credits. And you know what I mean? And that's fine in a game because you're playing the game and you are overcoming the threat yourself. And so it being that linear with no real stakes is normal for a game because the appeal comes from making this happen through your gameplay, right? But in a movie, you need stuff like stakes and decisions and trade-offs and losses and all of that because a writer just decided this was going to happen and you are experiencing it passively. I think that makes a huge difference. And I've seen this so a bunch of times now, like The Mandalorian, the early seasons especially, were kind of similar, where you're kind of just going from one thing to the next, and you're just overcoming challenges, but you're just watching somebody succeed, right? And I feel like there was another movie relatively recently that we talked about. Project Hail Mary was similar, where you're just watching somebody solve one problem after the next, and there's no real drama behind it. Rebel Moon was similar, where you have all these side quests where you have to collect the different party members. Like, there's just a school of writing where people seem to be mostly influenced by games. And that's not fundamentally a bad thing, but it seems to have taught them the wrong things about what stories are like and what makes compelling drama. It's a bit like watching a let's play, right? Like when you watch somebody play a video game, like there's no real drama, no real tension. The enjoyment comes from watching them play well, right? Maybe better than you could or whatever, right? Or doing stuff you can't do in the game or whatever. It's not a narrative that's compelling, right? And that's because you are just watching somebody go through the steps of succeeding. Movies don't work this way. And I have a feeling, like I can't prove this, but and this may just be coincidence, but I've just seen this in movies and shows over and over the last few years, where people structure their stories as if it was a game and you're just watching somebody play the game. And they don't seem to understand what a real conflict is and what a real character journey is. I don't know, because that's kind of what this is, right? Each character has their little challenge and they overcome it. And I think that is kind of why, one of the reasons, like there's more than one reason, but I think that is kind of more or less the reason why it doesn't work. Because I think each of those could have carried the movie if you turned it into a proper story.
I can't really say it might have been a thing where they were doing too much. And the reason why I say that is because obviously we're jumping from different character stories, which I was going to ask as well. Did that work for you, or did it just take
Nope.
away from you? It didn't work for you at all.
I think what was needed is that they came together in the end. Either that or that they kind of elaborate on the same point in some way, or are similar in some way, or look at the same issues differently, like from different angles or something.
So I was just gonna say they should have shown like different perspectives, like different outcomes that come with different perspectives, because it just felt like we're watching each of them go through the same issues and each of them having the same outcome, just just their tactics done slightly differently. And there's nothing really to that. Like there's nothing really to a story like that. There has to be, like you said, there has to be like different perspectives on what's going on, and just like there has to be more than just watching someone do the same thing with different characters, if that makes sense, because that's what it felt like was happening.
Yeah, it really depends on what you're trying to do, right? Like there's different approaches to this. I think you can have multiple protagonists that are each on their little journey, but then they kind of need to orbit kind of a similar idea. Or you have one protagonist and the other characters contribute to their journey, which we also didn't get here. It's not even really about the disaster or really about surviving the disaster. Like for example, if the entire story had followed these researchers and they kind of just witnessed different fates of how people were impacted by the storm and by the sharks on their way to rescuing Lisa, they kind of encounter all these different people. That's a story structure that absolutely works, but we didn't get that either. They get just as much time or just as little time as everybody else. And so there's no real through line and no real, like doesn't build towards anything. Is the problem.
I was waiting for there to be something between Dakota and Lisa, because obviously one lost her mother and Lisa was obviously pregnant and was having a baby on the way. And I thought that there'd be like some type of like dynamic between the end of the movie where she would have like seen like a motherly figure in Lisa versus like Lisa like understanding the need to be a parent. She was kind of already. But I mean, by the end of the movie, like Lisa just doesn't really care about Dakota, even though she saved her life multiple times, and kind of has this like phone conversation with her mom, even like if her mom every time on the FaceTime was so annoying because like her dialect was so crap. It just like they could have been two complete strangers that I'd never met by the end of the movie. Like there was literally nothing between them. So as if I didn't like Lisa at all throughout the movie, I definitely didn't like her by the end of the movie.
I'm a bit disappointed with how they portrayed her in this film, because the reason why I say that is because she was in a film which I really liked, which was a Netflix movie actually. It was called Fair Play, and that's kind of like when I was introduced to her as an actor. So watching her in this, I was like, what the flip is going on? I'm sure it's not her as an actress, it's just the material that she's been given because yeah, I'll be honest, I do understand why you say she was kind of annoying. She was kind of annoying, especially when it comes to the way that she was asking for help, which kind of annoyed me. It was like, I get it, you understand. To be fair, it is realistic for you to kind of like, because she didn't kind of push it, but in a way she kind of was pushing it in terms of asking the girl for help. Because what I'm trying to say is because that's still a teenage. I think she was a teenager. I'm not too sure, but she was a young girl, and the way that she was kind of like asking her for help was kind of like unfair of her, but it was fair because she was kind of using like the pregnant excuse in a way without actually saying it at times. But she did say it. It was just the way that she would do certain things and the way she would say certain things was like, oh damn, you're kind of annoying me, you know. But I get why you're doing it because you're in this life or death situation. But kind of using your pregnancy is kind of dread in a way because you're still asking a lot from a young girl to kind of like give up her life for yours. It's morally a good thing to do, but it's just like it's kind of like a dire situation because you've got a young girl, you've got a pregnant woman, and you're asking the young girl who hasn't really even lived life to kind of sacrifice her life.
Honestly, I wasn't even that invested in the character at that point. I mean, honestly, like if you're in that situation, like you're gonna try to get help from anybody, right? And you do whatever works.
Apparently, one interesting fact though, apparently they said the set was an actual set in terms of like the flooding wasn't CGI. Well, I'm sure there was some CGI at some parts, but they said that a lot of it was actually practical.
But you don't have to be James Cameron to actually put your actors in water for your flooded town movie. I don't know that that's worth points.
Nah, I just thought it was interesting. I thought that was I wouldn't say I thought that was the CGI, but
It would have been funnier if the entire water was CGI and the actors never got wet. I don't know, like that would have at least been something.
I think it's time to go to last thoughts. Cool. I will start off by giving this movie I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. I was thinking of giving it a 5, but I think this is below average. I'll definitely give it a 4 out of 10. Was disappointing. I was expecting more because this is my kind of film, but unfortunately, you just don't get more. You get moments, mainly with the Foster family. For me personally, that was my personal favorite when watching this film. And I think they should have revolved the story around them, as well as did a bit more with the whole meat truck idea, because that was a pretty cool idea. But unfortunately, the way the story was presented just didn't work for me. And I think there was lazy writing and, the character decisions, character logic in this film was, it was borderline amazing in terms of how stupid it was. It wasn't a bad movie, though. Let me just make that clear. I'm more disappointed than pissed off. Like I say, I'm disappointed because I wanted more from this film. Like I said, it's my kind of film. So I'm just more so disappointed. That's why my opinion feels a bit harsh, even though the trailer wasn't really for me, but I liked moments of the movie and I thought they should have revolved it around that. But yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10.
I think I got what I expected out of the movie, which is not that much. Had good enough ideas behind it, had a kind of good enough premise, but just kind of failed on execution for the most part. This is just underdeveloped ideas that, if pushed a little bit further, could have been something very interesting, but unfortunately, it's not. So I guess with that, I'd give it I'd give it a 4 out of 10 as well.
So I expected very little from this movie, and that's what I got. It just fails to be convincing on any level. The action isn't that great, the creatures aren't that great, Peril isn't that great, characters are pretty bland. It's just waste of space, and there's just not much that sets this movie apart and makes this movie actually convincing or worth recommending or worth watching. So that's a no out of 5.
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into this week's episode.
If you reach this part of the episode, as always, we appreciate you pressing play, giving us a like, and just generally checking us out. And as always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a whole bunch of nonsense, then I think I've got some new foster parents for you. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys, we'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.